This is the tutorial for the Lavant Tunic by the Sussex Seamstress. To start with, we're going to put some strips of interfacing along the front neckline. So straight after you unpin your pattern from your pieces, you should have two top front pieces. There we go, that's the wrong side of mine inside there. So I've got the wrong side up. I'm going to take one piece and I've just cut some strips, quite narrow strips of interfacing, just regular interfacing. Check which side the glue is on. That side needs to go down. It always looks a bit shinier with the glue on. And basically I just need to make sure that there's some interfacing a centimetre in from that edge, because that's where my stitch line will be. So I want to hold it firm as I stitch so it won't stretch. So there we go. I've done that and crossed it over at the point. I'm going to press that now to fuse it to the fabric. There we go. It's all stuck down. And as an additional little help or aid, I'm going to use my ruler to mark a centimetre from that raw edge at the bottom of the V with a pencil. This is a very soft pencil, so it will show up nicely for you guys at home. And basically marking my seam allowance at the bottom of the V, and I'm going to go across just one stitch at the bottom of that V as well. Oh, I need a tiny little bit more of interfacing on the end there. I'll pop that on in a minute. But you can see there, that's my seam allowance where I'm going to stitch my nice neat V. So neckline to stitch next. Here we go. This is one of my pieces right side up. This is my other piece that I put the interfacing on. You can see that I put another little piece at the bottom there just to make sure it was all reinforced right down in that V. I'm going to lay those on top and pop some pins in. And as I said before, I'll be pivoting when I get down to the bottom of the V and doing just one single stitch across before I go up the other side of the neckline. This just makes it a bit less bulky. When you turn it through, it'll be nice and crisp. So now I'm doing my seam allowance 1 centimetre all the way around the neck, down one side of the V, needle in, pivot, one stitch, pivot, off we go. Back tack to finish. There we are, and you can see the stitch line. I had that pencil line to follow and I've stitched on that pencil line, and I've done that one stitch going across at the bottom of the V. So I'm going to just clip into each side of that little stitch and do a few random clips up the neckline. It's not curved, so you don't need very many. And then I'm going to trim down the side with the interfacing. You'll need to trim it all the way round. I'm just going to trim a little bit and then show you that you want to fold all that seam allowance over towards the interfaced piece and stitch right on the edge there to do your edge stitching. So I've trimmed and clipped all of mine now, and all the action, all the seam allowances are pulled over to one side underneath, and I'm just going to go down and stitch to that point and then back tack, and I'm coming off and then I'm going back on. I'm not going to try and stitch around the V again, just because it can end up with a little bit of a pleat or a tuck down there and you want it to look nice and crisp. So I prefer to do it this way. So that's how it should look. We need to give it a press now. There we are, lovely crisp neckline there. Oops, a straggler. That's how yours should look as well. That's obviously the wrong side. This is the right side. Okay, so I'm just going to stitch these two front pieces together now. I'm going to use a big stitch just within the 1 centimetre seam allowance because you don't want it to show when you seam it up. But it will just stitch them together, meaning you can just treat it as one piece of fabric then. You don't have to pin lots of different layers together. It will just behave like one piece of fabric. There we go. Just done on a big stitch. So it's all together now. So next we're going to do some gathering stitches in the top part of the lower front. I have a directional print, so I know this is the top of my panel. If you've got plain fabric, it doesn't matter. So big stitch, and I'm stitching 1 centimetre from the edge for my first row, and then I'm going to stitch halfway between the raw edge and that last stitch line for my second row. This can then be pulled up quite easily when I come to attach it to the top front. There we go, 2 rows of stitching should look a bit like that. So now I'm going to attach that gathered piece to the top that we've already done, the top front there. And this is the lower part. I'm going to just fold these in half to mark the halfway point, as it just makes it a little bit easier to distribute the gathers more evenly. Find the halfway point on the upper part as well. It's about there. Pin those together like so. And then pin the other end. So you've got right sides together. The gathering stitches are at the top, which is where you're pinning, so that the gather threads will be next to the upper panel. 2 pins. Right, now for the fiddly bit. You want to grab your gathering threads. It always gathers up nice and easy if you use the bobbin threads. And I'm just going to pull that now and work the gathers right across to the other side until the upper and lower panels are the same width, so they sit together nicely. It's nice and flat. Then you can just titivate your gathers, try and make them even. Do allow a flat 1 centimetre flat piece either side, as that will be your seam. It'll be much easier to seam it and it'll look neater if you leave that flat. And now I'm going to do my 1 centimetre seam allowance. All seam allowances are 1 centimetre on my patterns unless otherwise stated. And I'm going to stitch across on that bottom gather line. There we go. All stitched together. And I'm going to just overlock that edge. You could zigzag it if you prefer. There we go. That is one front panel. I shall give those pleats a little bit of a steam just so they lie flat. So let's put these side panels on now. That's our front panel all in one piece. And I've got 2 side panels here, so let's take those apart. Grab the correct one. So right sides together. There should be notches here, and you'll find if you use them it will help you to ease in the bust curve. So starting at the top, pop a pin in. There's a notch that should match where your pleated panel attaches to the upper bodice panel. There we go. Let's match those up. Pop a pin in there. And then there should be kind of 3 notches over the bust, one under, one on and one just above. That's it. That's the notches. Incidentally, if you're worried about getting that curve neatly onto the front panel, you can always pop a gather thread just around the curved bit, 1 centimetre from the edge, and just give it a little bit of a pull up. That might help you. I like to stitch my bust seams with the curve underneath next to the feed dog, because I just find it eases it in for me a little bit. So there we go, we've got all our pins in. Oh, I'll put one more down here, and we're going to stitch centimetre from the edge again. I'm starting from the top here because I want to do the curved section underneath next to the feed. Let's take these pins out and have a look. Yep, that looks great. So I'm going to overlock this seam and show you, there we go, what it looks like now. Starting to look nice and neat on the inside. And it looks good on the outside. So we're going to press that, and then you're going to do the same for the other side panel. Back neck facing. I've cut mine from a piece of fabric that I'd already applied the interfacing to before I cut it out, so that I know it's exactly the right size and I know it won't stretch. I've overlocked the outside edge before I start, and I'm going to pin it to my back bodice panel. Right sides together. You'll see there's some notches on your neckline. Match those up to the notches on your facing, and then give it a good pin. Starting off at the shoulder. Work your way around. Sew them together 1 centimetre in. Take those pins out, and then you want to trim down the facing side of the seam allowance to half, because we're going to edge stitch this again. So you want to trim that down to half and then clip into all the curves, and it's worth clipping in every couple of centimetres or so to get a really nice flat edge once you've edge stitched it. So snip in towards the stitching, don't actually cut the stitching. There you go, you can see it can open out now. So trim all that down, and then you want to push all that seam allowance towards the facing again and stitch on the facing side just really close to the edge. Here we go. And as I go, I like to just straighten out any curves while I'm stitching through, and just make sure you get all the layers pulled across underneath towards the facing. There we go, edge stitched. That lays nice and flat already. We're going to give it a press, and then that's ready to go. Time to sew the shoulder and side seams. So I've got my front panel right side up, back panel right side down. I'm going to pin my shoulders, but I'm going to ignore this facing for the minute. So you just want to match those edges up. So where the facing meets the back panel, you need to pin that to the edge of the front neck and match your shoulders. And you're just going to stitch to that point. Let's do this side. So again, you're going to pin it, ignore the facing, other than you're going to stop your stitching when you get to that seam. Now we're going to pin the side seams, so we'll do those at the same time. Okay, so we're stitching 1 centimetre from the edge, as always, all the way down the sides, both sides, and like I say, stitching the shoulder from the side seam just to that point on the facing there. So that facing is still separate, and you can see, there we go, look, that's flappy separate and everything else is all sandwiched together. So I'm going to show you a nifty trick now. If you fold that facing back over the front neckline, matching those shoulder seams, pop a pin in there, and then you just need to stitch on that same stitch line that you've just done on the shoulders. Let's show you again. So we've got that seam is the shoulder seam, we've got the facing there, we're just going to fold it back over. There you go, you can see that's the neckline there. We're going to fold it back across the neck piece and matching those shoulder seams, and we're going to pin all those together, and we're going to stitch right across on that original seam line. There we go, a centimetre down. So here we go, I've got that seam line facing up so I can follow the same stitch line, doing that for both shoulders. There we are, and then I've just got to trim off this bulky corner bit, which is a bit tough, and I'm just going to trim that facing side down a little bit as well because it gets a little bit bulky otherwise. And then I'm going to turn it through, so just the facing, pull it through, and there you go, you've got your nice neat finish. So you do the same on the other side. Once you've overlocked or zigzagged all your seams that you've just sewn, your side seams there and your shoulders, then you can turn those through again. I'll just trim this one quickly as I forgot to do it before I overlocked. There we go, pull it through. Lovely. Give that a press now. And that's how it should look. Nice, neat side seams, and your shoulders and your facing all lying nice and flat. So now we're going to pop a seam in these sleeves. Again, obviously there's two. So I'm going to fold it so that the underarm seams are together, right sides together, and stitch a centimetre from the edge again. There you go, fabulous. We'll give that an overlock or a zigzag, nice and neat, and then give it a press. Just turn it through, give it a press, and then obviously you want to do the same for the other sleeve. Now we're going to put these sleeves in. There's one of my sleeves, just a reminder that there are notches on these to tell you left and right, and also I've put just one gather thread in here, just on the top of the sleeve head, the big round bit at the top, because I thought it might be helpful to show you how to use that to ease your sleeves in if you're a bit worried about putting sleeves in with ease. So I've checked my notches, it's my right sleeve, so I'm going to pop these seams together, pull it through and put my first pin in. So once those seams are together, I just need to match the rest of the notches. I need to trim those hairy bits off. So I've got one notch for the sleeve head, which matches the shoulder seam. And then I've got 2 notches, matching 2 notches, so I know it's the right sleeve for the right armhole, and 1 notch to 1 notch. Pop a pin in there. And then I'm just going to pull this thread up and show you how you can just ease that in. So I'm just pulling it up ever so slightly so it looks a bit sort of crinkly, like a sort of crinkly lettuce edge rather than gathered. Oh, now this one with my... There we go, got it. And pull that. Now, again, you don't want gathers, you just want it flat where the stitching is, but it'll be all crinkly lettuce and the frayed edge. There we go. So that should now pin in quite nicely and it should look flat. That's it. They're both the same length. And like I say, don't pull it up so that you get actual gathers or pleats, just enough to help you ease that fullness in. So that's going in nicely, perfect. Oh, there's a little pleat there, just flatten that out before I stitch it. There we go, that's better. Now when I sew sleeves in, I always stitch from the inside of the sleeve, so I start at the underarm, work my way around, and if it's going to be for a coat or a jacket or something that is going to get quite a lot of wear, I will often go round twice just for strength. But here, look, you can see I'm going over that gather thread, so it looks like it's all pleated because that outer edge is so much longer, but actually it's not. Ta-da! Look, even that bit that looked like it was pleated isn't, but it's just nicely eased in. Let's have a look at the outside. So that's what you get, a beautifully eased in sleeve. Great. So now we're going to just overlock or zigzag the raw edges. There we go. And I quite like to just give it a bit of a steam rather than a press at that sleeve head. So next it's cuffs and hem. Nice easy bit. You're nearly there. So I'm going to overlock my hem first and my cuffs, and then I'm just going to turn them up a centimetre and stitch them. There we go. I didn't have the exact colour threads for the overlocker for this. I don't often match. I usually use black or white. I'm a bit lazy, but neither of those seemed quite right for this colour. So the closest I had was this kind of gold colour. Do you like to match your threads to your garment? Let me know in the comments. Here we go. I'm just going around. I'm just turning it up as I go, but you can press it first if it's easier for you, or tack it. And I'm just using a centimetre, as I think that's all this cotton needs. There we are, all neat. Give it a press. A nice neat cuff as well. So there you have it, a Lavant top. It should look a bit like this. Enjoy!